Ambassador Nozipho Mhlakato-Diseko, always good to see you and thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Sherwin. Always good to be with you.
Ambassador, given your leadership role in the negotiations that led to this treaty being adopted in 2017 and now its subsequent entry into force, your reaction to the news overnight with Honduras becoming the 50th state to ratify, which was the threshold required for this treaty's activation. What are your thoughts at this time?
I'm really satisfied. Honduras deposited its instrument on the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, the 75th anniversary of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. You know, when the UN was established, the first resolution it passed, the first, Res 1, was on nuclear disarmament to address problems arising from the discovery of nuclear energy, as it were, or the splitting of the atom. We are delighted that there is now a norm that is established with respect to nuclear weapons, which completes the cycle in relation to weapons of mass destruction. Up until now, nuclear weapons were not covered by any international norm in terms of prohibition. This is a treaty that is complementary and arises out of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, in particular Article 6 of the Non-Proliferation Treaty on the obligations of the nuclear weapon states to liquidate their nuclear arsenal to make us all safe.
Let me ask you that specifically. What are the key differences between this treaty, the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, right? In short, the Nuclear Ban Treaty, and the Treaty on Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, which came into force in the 1970s, over 50 years ago. Are there key differences that we can articulate?
None whatsoever. As I said, it arises out of Article 6 of the Non-Proliferation Treaty in a context where South Africa actually is responsible for the indefinite extension of the NPT. So we would never generate a treaty that would be in competition with it to undermine the treaty. But we were driven by what we saw in the lack of willingness by nuclear weapon states to live up to their obligations with regards to Article 6 that calls for nuclear disarmament in real terms, as it were. A further consideration that was a compelling argument for us was the reluctance by the P5 nuclear weapon states to work with us to find a way in which we would put in place something that would guide the world to respond to an accidental detonation of a nuclear weapon, either intended or accidental. They still would not want to live up to that obligation. This is a logical extension of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. That it happens 50 years later, on the 50th anniversary of the NPT, illustrates the challenges that we've had with Article 6 of the NPT. They're complementary.
Let me jump in, right? So there's been a great deal of opposition to this treaty. It passed in the General Assembly in 2017 with 122 votes in favor, 1 against, 1 abstention. But 69 nations, Ambassador, didn't even bother to vote. And that includes all the nuclear weapon states, including most of NATO, who have opposed this treaty from the onset. What do you make of their argument that this treaty undermines the 50-year-old Treaty on Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, which they regard as a cornerstone of the global architecture on non-proliferation?
I just want to point out that amongst these countries that are saying so, they were so late in ratifying the NPT. In fact, some of the ones that are actually bullying countries and asking them to pull out of the Ban Treaty. France joined the NPT, ratified the NPT after South Africa, after we became independent, as it were. What has undermined the NPT, what stands to undermine the credibility of the NPT, is the reluctance of the nuclear weapon states to dismantle their nuclear weapons, their continued expenditure on the modernization of these weapons, which have been shown to be totally redundant when it comes to new threats that we're faced with. You can't fight COVID with nuclear weapons, but as long as you possess them, you put the world at risk in case you explode, or it explodes accidentally. We've known of cases where a major country lost a warhead and didn't know where it was for 48 hours another routinely transport piece on a highway and people are driving behind. And what if an accident happened? But this treaty arises out of the NPT. It is an affirmation of the NPT. It comes out of Article 6 of the NPT. Why they're opposed to it is the belief that somehow power arises out of the possession to annihilate, of the possession of material to annihilate the world. That is irresponsible.
I like your answer on how nuclear weapons don't help us with COVID-19. Let me just read you the letter that was sent to signatories of the treaty by the United States last week. They wrote that the nuclear ban treaty, quote, turns the back on the clock on verification and disarmament and is dangerous. They continue, although we recognize your sovereign right to ratify or accede to the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons, we believe that you have made a strategic error and should withdraw your instrument of ratification or accession. What do you say to that?
That is the nonsense, really. We turn the back on verification. South Africa is a state party to all the verification instruments of the International Atomic Energy Agency. Remember that South Africa was the first country to dismantle its nuclear capability. We're fully committed to all the instruments of the International Atomic Energy Agency, including what is called 93+2. Whereas you can verify what non-nuclear weapon states have, there's no obligation to verify on the side of the nuclear weapon states. How can we not know what is happening on the nuclear weapons, on the side of the nuclear weapon states and feel safe? What the US is scared of is that for the first time, there is no moral reason, absolutely no moral reason for possessing nuclear weapons. But above all, they are prohibited, just like chemical weapons. They are prohibited.
Final question for you. So all in all, Ambassador, this is a good day. It adds to the global architecture to get rid of nuclear weapons. You must be very happy.
Very, very happy. This concludes Mandela's dream of a world free of weapons of mass destruction. You know, we remember being motivated by what Bishop Tutu actually says about nuclear weapons. There are no safe hands for these weapons. You just have to think of terrorist networks that have a capability, cyber capability, and they explode a device remotely elsewhere. What would happen to South Africa? How would we deal with the fallout? The US is scared that it cannot justify legally the possession of these weapons, morally the possession of these weapons. They can't blame us. They left the table. They did not want to negotiate. Instead, they stood outside of the General Assembly, picketing the General Assembly. A ridiculous thing. A member of the Security Council picketing the General Assembly. You negotiate with member states. Leadership is about negotiating. But let me comment about what they're doing. They are asking states to unratify a treaty. That is a danger to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Where will states end once you unratify a treaty? What's to stop you from unratifying the Non-Proliferation Treaty? They're teaching us habits that we don't want in a context where multilateralism is challenged. We can't pick and choose the bits of multilateralism that we want. But leadership comes with responsibility. And in this case, they have obligations, and those obligations are now covered under a legal norm that is applicable to all, including them.
Congratulations, Ambassador, and thank you as always for speaking with us.
Thank you, Sherwin, for giving us the space when we were negotiating this, for the world to understand us. In your capacity as president of the UN Press Corps, you gave us ample space to address questions from journalists, and that's how I think now people are well conversant with this treaty, and they understand that what's in the aid memoir of the Americans is really unfounded. And they are the ones who are undermining the NPT. They are the ones who actually destroyed the review conference of 2015 and ensured that it didn't have any outcome. It is the United States of America that walked in. So since 2010, there's not been an outcome on what to do to further the treaty in its implementation. It's not us who did that. It's the Americans who did that.
Let's leave it there, Ambassador. Thank you. Ambassador
Thank
Nzimbo Diseko is South Africa's permanent representative to the United Nations and its organizations in Geneva, and played a key role in negotiating the nuclear ban treaty with all UN member states.
And that's how we come to the end of the Full View this evening. Thanks for watching, and it's goodbye from the team. We'll see you next